Kawhi Leonard is out. Derrick White is in for Team USA. So let's just do this episode on Derrick White. Let's appreciate the season that Derrick White had, and he shut up a lot of people along the way. We'll talk about it right now on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
Thanks to Blockbuster brand, it's holiday season. Drop Drew in the mix, and 3 from KP. No, we not on the Knicks. Flushing competition like Al on Giannis. Juice and Big Juice, still Beantown's finest. Banner 18 going up in the rafters. Watch the C's game in Locked On after. Karalis on the breakdown, clutch like a tip from D. White on the breakdown. John on the mic, documenting domination. Matter pen a back bay, it's all C's nation. Rain and J's, how we started, raising business, how we finish. Locked On Celtics pod, home of the winners. Peace.
Hey there, welcome back to the Locked On Celtics podcast. Right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and I got you covered every Monday through Friday with a free, fresh podcast that drops directly to your device when you subscribe. So go ahead and do that wherever you get your podcast. Watch a show on YouTube, get into the comments section. Let me know what you're thinking about what I'm saying. Today's topic, Derrick White. Just show Derrick White a bunch of love in today's comments. So go ahead and do that. If you're new to the show, I'm John Karalis. Played a long time ago. Now I'm covering the Celtics as a beat writer for Boston Sports Journal. I also wrote this commemorative book, Built Different. It's chronicling the entire Celtics championship season. It's available kind of everywhere books are sold and online, triumphbooks.com. Go check that out. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. So Derrick White was named to Team USA after Kawhi Leonard dropped out, which, I mean, why was Kawhi Leonard even there? This is a great opportunity. I'm doing these appreciation shows throughout the summer. I was going to start going in order of like Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum and all of that. But because Derrick White got named to Team USA on Wednesday, I made the Thursday show Derrick White, and I'm bringing on a new guest here, Noah Dalzell from SB Nation. And like, what's your resume at this point? We only have half an hour, so please keep it brief.
No, thanks for having me, John. As I think you know, this is my favorite Celtics podcast, so I'm very happy to be here.
This is the only reason I had you on the show, so you could say that out loud.
Exactly. Well, there you go. You didn't even have to tell me. So yeah, I've been writing for a couple of different sites. For Celtics blog was where I kind of got my start, do some work for CLNS, then I cover women's basketball as well. But I'm about to join some new places, so I'll announce that shortly. But yeah, really excited to be here and excited to talk about the Celtics and in particular Derrick White.
Noah exploded onto the scene this season. You might be the only person who had a better season than Derrick White, Celtics wise. Came out of nowhere and now is like one of the hottest properties in Celtics media. And Derrick White had, obviously an incredible season. We know what kind of season he had. We know how much he's meant to the Celtics. But let's just start with this Olympic thing, because now the Celtics can be the first team to ever have 3 players who won a championship and a gold medal in the same year, which shows a little bit about how special this team is. No, look, a lot of people have been trying to find ways to crap all over the Celtics season. Not only are all the stats dominant, not only are all the results showing how dominant the Celtics are, now finally, after getting shut out of most of these postseason awards, you're seeing a third Celtic. When Kawhi dropped out, it's a third Celtic that's on this team. It's how good this team is and how versatile this team is.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Honestly, we already knew he was the one that was kind of lined up and primed to replace someone if there was an injury. That report came out during the finals. And I think Kawhi was always the main suspect there. And I'm a little surprised. I feel like there's been some like negative backlash to him being appointed to that role. And in reality, he is like the perfect player that you might expect to join an Olympic team filled with stars and filled with scorers, right? So to me, it's like this is the dream player you would add. I think if you look at teams that haven't succeeded at the international level, a lot of times it's because you don't have players like Derrick White that are used to being in that complementary, like utility role. So yeah, it's pretty wild, like the leap that he made this year to actually be in this position. But I think he's the perfect fit for what they might not have on this roster or what they might want from a 12th spot.
Yeah, look, he can come out there. Do we have to really list out all of the things that Derrick White can do? Obviously, he can be a point guard. He can be a shooting guard. He can defend multiple positions. It's exactly the type of versatility you need with a team that's as stacked as Team USA, but also an international team that, has to get used to a lot of different rules. The one thing that I think makes Derrick White suited perfectly for this is his ability to process the game and understand the game. If anybody's going to be able to say, "Oh, okay, this is how things are going," he's the guy that can read it, adjust, and make the next play as well as anybody. I think people have talked about it. Like, he's at that LeBron level. It's a genius level processing, and it's what makes him as good as he is. And people talked about Jaylen should have been in consideration. And sure, I don't know if his tweets today made any, was any connection. That was the raised eyebrow emojis that he
Yeah.
he can't be that mad because his teammate is going. I didn't even know that he was available, if he was available or what, but I get the Derrick White thing. And look, if somebody else drops out, if Kevin Durant has a calf issue, if he wants to drop out, then you can bring Jaylen Brown in. Let's just put the Celtics in there and have them win the gold medal on top of it. But let's go back to the beginning of this season. And we talked about what Derrick White has become. I think Derrick White probably had the best case scenario season. If you look at how many guys probably had the best seasons of their careers, there's at least probably like 3 or 4. And I think Derrick is chief among them, where he came in and, shot perfectly, played the point, played all these different roles, defended perfectly, blocked every shot in the world. For a guy that wasn't on ESPN's top 100 coming into the season, to have this kind of season and have an obvious top, I don't know, where would you put him in the top 100 now? I started this by saying he shut a lot of people up. Like, it starts out with the ESPN people not putting him in their top 100, and he just came out and did everything you want a player to do.
Yeah, definitely. And on your Jaylen Brown point, I think part of why he was left out of the Olympic team potentially was because, this team was kind of predetermined. I think that maybe had they made this entire roster after the playoff run that he had, he would have been one of those 11 guys. But it was clear that they wanted someone that kind of is a do everything type player that Derrick White has shown that he can do. And the more of those guys you have on a team, the better. But like you said, he was a relatively unknown guy nationally at the beginning of the year. And I think that there's some media members that have been kind of pushing his agenda. Like JJ Redick was one that had been kind of talking about him throughout the year. And then it almost became like he went from being really underrated to everybody knowing he's so underrated that everybody kind of knows now to appreciate him and everything that he does. But at many points throughout this year, I thought he was the best player on the floor. He played like it at various points. I think throughout the playoff run, other guys stepped up. But there were moments during the regular season where it was like you wanted him on the floor. And I actually thought that the games that he sat out, he had a handful of games, I think when he had a child born or something else, that's when the Celtics looked their worst. They were able to almost like withstand the injury of the absence of every player in the team. And then when Derrick White wasn't there, it was like they were really missing something. And that was super apparent throughout the season.
Yeah. I put him up there kind of just below Jaylen and Jayson as a year from now or 2 years from now, when things need to be retooled. And obviously, what's he, 30 years old now?
30.
Things can change. Yeah, he just had his 30th birthday. Things can change as he moves forward, but as the Celtics retool their team, obviously you need your 2 stars. They're probably going to let Holiday go. There might be a moment there where they let Porzingis walk and they have to retool their team in a couple of seasons. But Derrick White, I think, has to stay. He's the exact kind of, like, you need a versatile, do everything kind of guy like him, because he can play point or the 2 or the 3. If you go with a little bit of a smaller lineup, you can he can guard multiple positions. He can get in there, and as a help defender, he's incredibly smart. I thought the Celtics locking him up at, what was it, 118 for 4 seasons. I thought that was maybe one of Brad Stevens' best moves this summer, because it keeps a guy here at a below market value contract, and he's so important that he can make other guys around the team better. Just he's the connective tissue that makes other guys fit, right? If the fit's not exactly right between whichever other player and Jayson Tatum, let's say, well, you just throw a little Derrick White in there and that fills the gaps, and he makes all of this kind of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think exactly that's the reason why he was chosen to be on the Olympic team too, right? Is because you have all these stars. It's like, how do you connect all these pieces? And Steve Kerr said the other day, they're nowhere near being able to compete at a high level. I think he's the kind of guy that helps expedite that process. And we've already seen that. And we've also seen that on like an individual skills level, he's taken leaps. He got a lot stronger this year. I think that helped him a lot. His shot has become a lot more consistent. There was very limited stretches throughout the season where he was struggling. For the most part, I thought that he had it going. During the playoffs, he was very effective. Throughout the year, at some points, like, he was their most clutch three-point shooter. Down with a few minutes to go, like, there's nobody you want shooting a three on this team more than Derrick White, right? So to me, it's like he kind of became an all-around player with no real weaknesses in his game. Like, he kind of has everything in his game, and maybe the most valuable thing is his personality and the fact that he's someone that is just willing to play any role, to take 3 shots, to take 25 shots if he needs to. I bet you next year, if they told him you're coming off the bench, like, we're revamping the team, he'd be okay with it. Like, there's not many guys that would be okay with something like that after the year that he just had. So I think that aspect of him is maybe the part that's still a little underrated or under-discussed, and just how valuable that is on a team with so many stars and so many people that have achieved so much individually as well.
Let's talk about his personality, because there are a couple of things that stick out, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it's such an important part of why Derrick White is who he is, and as important as he is. We'll talk about that in just a second. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. I know summer means baseball, and I am looking forward to getting out to Fenway Park for at least a couple of Red Sox games, maybe try to get myself into some of those green monster seats. And I know my plan, because I'm going to have the Gametime app on my phone, and I'm going to go sit at one of the bars, have a couple of drinks right up until first pitch. Because first of all, as an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, they can get me the tickets faster and easier. And on Gametime, those prices go down the closer we get to first pitch. So I'm going to really try to thread that needle. I feel good about it on the Gametime app. They've got these last minute deals that can save me up to 60% off buying last minute tickets for sports. But not only that, concerts, comedy shows, theater, anything that's got online sales at for their tickets, you could probably get them on Gametime and get yourself maybe a flash deal that's an exclusive in-app deal on select seats ahead of the game or the event. Or you can do a zone deal where you choose the section, Gametime picks the seats. So you do all that, you get the all-in pricing, you toggle the all-in pricing, and when you go check out, that's the price you're going to pay. You can make sure you like your seat, because they've got panoramic views from your seat, and you can feel good about the lowest price guarantee. They will credit you 110% of the difference if you find the same ticket somewhere else for less. All you have to do is download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON, LOCKED, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you for making Locked On Celtics your first listen every day. Go check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube, on the Amazon Fire TV channels app. Real talk, real sports, real conversation, real arguments if they happen, not the fake stuff that you're going to see on major networks. So go check out Locked On Sports Today, wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube and on the Amazon free Fire TV channels app. Let's get back to the discussion here with Noah on Derrick White. And for people, I keep forgetting this. Noah, I don't know if you are like me at all, but whenever there's a new part of my routine, it takes me like a month to get into like, okay, I have to use this graphic up here. The NBA belt champions, the Celtics are the champs. They hold the NBA belt. I keep forgetting to put this graphic on. People are yelling at me in the comments, and I deserve all of their scorn for it. All right. You know where I'm going to go with this. What's the one thing that we saw every time at a practice, at a shoot around, every time we were there and Derrick White was on the court? We didn't even plan this before.
I think I know what you're going to say. You're talking about the shooting games at the end of practice and just like how happy he is and how he's like a little kid at a playground.
Exactly it. We did not coordinate that. I just said it and you knew. That's right. So I think I keep talking about how happy Kristaps Porzingis was all season long, and he was absolutely the happiest person I've ever seen in my life. Just walking around, just happy with like a little coffee cup or something. Like he was just the happiest dude. But Derrick White legitimately is, I think, the happiest dude around. Just naturally, like I think he takes this very seriously, but also he does not take himself too seriously. And I think that's like everybody's got an ego at the NBA level. You have to. But I think Derrick White is the way he carries himself is part of what makes him so great on this team. And those shooting contests, it kind of sucks to see Jermaine Buckner go because he was like always won these shooting contests. But D White, like doing all that stuff was just like goofing around. And yeah, sometimes he made us wait when it was his turn to talk because we had to wait for that shooting contest to end. But it was just fun to watch him and the coaches have some fun. And to have a guy that's just kind of goofy and not taking himself too seriously on an NBA team, that it's hard to explain how much that helps the locker room, how much that helps the vibe, how much that just helps the team overall.
Yeah, to me, honestly, so this is my first year covering the team, and there was a lot of cool stuff that I just noticed that I didn't know what things looked like behind the scenes and how people carried themselves. That's going to be the most vivid memory that I have from the season is just after every single practice, for people that aren't there, it's just all of the assistant coaches and Derrick White participating in some outlandish shooting drill of trying to throw the ball off the wall and onto the ground and off their heads. And it's like, I don't know who the mastermind is of coming up with the drill, but Derrick White's like in the center of it, right? And it didn't matter if they were coming off of a loss or a win, or if it was the finals, or if it was preseason, or if he was in a great stretch, or if he couldn't make a shot. Like, he was laughing, he was goofy, and he was participating in it. And I always post these clips on Twitter, and whenever they just lost the game, everybody's all mad, like, why is he not locked in? Why is he doing this shooting drill? And it's like, this is who he is. He doesn't take himself too seriously, and he's going to have fun. And I also think it's why he's so good at basketball and why he's so good to have around, because when things aren't going well, like, he's able to still have this light energy about him. And it's completely different from anybody else that I've seen during my year of covering the Celtics. Like, I've never seen anybody like this that has this like childlike energy, but is also a very good NBA player.
Yeah, it is kind of wild to watch because, and I think people have this vision of an NBA player is supposed to be locked in and focused, laser focus. All right.
Right.
I'm so angry at these losses. And like, that's basically, it's Joe Mazzulla. Like Joe Mazzulla
and Jaylen Brown.
And Jaylen Brown. Yeah. Jaylen Brown. Yeah. After some wins, even angry, but like Joe was so pissed off at the loss. What was it in Atlanta that he ended up tearing his meniscus by going, and practicing martial arts until he couldn't go anymore. But that's not Derrick White. Like, Derrick White gets pissed, I'm sure, but he gets it. And I think he just kind of understands where it all fits. He's home with his family, his wife, his 2 kids, and he's just dad. And I think he appreciates, like, hey, I went 1 for 9 today, and I went home and my kids still love me. And I think that's the most important thing. Like, he's kind of said something along those lines multiple times throughout the season. And that's kind of grounding. And you understand, like, you're going to have your 7 for 8 shooting nights, just like you're going to have your 1 for 9. And in the end, you're still shooting about 40 something %. So it all works out. But his attitude and his very sarcastic kind of like personality fits. It's just like, I don't know, like his humor is just, he's gregarious. Is that the right word? Like, I don't know if that's the right term, but you kind of need, every locker room needs a Derrick White. Never mind how good of a player he is. I just think every locker room, if you have a Derrick White in there, just, yeah, whatever. Like that I think is so important. And the other favorite thing I think that he said all season was towards the end of the finals when he's talking about Drew Holiday and talking about how great a teammate Holiday was. And he's like, yeah, he could have come in and said, I'm Drew Holiday. And I would have been like, yeah, 100%, you're Drew Holiday. And that bit of like understanding, like, yeah, you're you, and I'm just going to sit back and kind of do whatever I need to do. That tells you a lot about, like, to the point you made. If they said, hey, Derrick, we need you to come off the bench this time, he'd be like, yeah, I've got my money, I've got my championship, I've got my team, like I've got everything. Like, what more do I want? Like, why would I ever like make us think about this? Yeah, are we going to win another championship if I do this? Great, I'm going to go have that parade again. And low key, aside from Sam Hauser throwing up on the duck boat, I think Derrick White ended up coming out like, I think he wins the drunkest Celtic award for coming out of that parade. That video of him going up and like high people along whatever fence that was, he was not coherent in that stretch.
Well, I think the other thing is we know what his personality is like, so it's so much easier to identify like when he's not being his normal sober self. Like, I feel like one of the things that I've really liked about him, and I get this question all the time from people who are fans of the team, is just like, who's your favorite player to interview or like talk to? And he's always been mine, just because I think he just treats the media like a normal person. Like he just interacts with us normally. He's a normal person. We're normal to him. We're all just normal. So if anytime he like strays from that, like in the parade, it's like, that's not really, his natural state. But I think that's one of the things that's really cool about him, is that he talks, with the coaches. He doesn't have like an NBA player's aura or ego, or this feeling of like having to be a superstar. And I think that if at this point he still doesn't have it, he probably never will, because he's pretty famous right now. Everybody loves him. The crowd is the loudest when he takes the floor of anybody at all during warm-ups. I always hear a pop, and then I look and I see Derrick White starting his warm-up. So like he's kind of at this peak of fame and success, and he's still this very level-headed, cool, normal person who's almost like a little shy. Like sometimes I think when he's at the podium, I feel like the dynamic with the media is almost like he's a little bit more of like the nervous one rather than how it usually kind of comes off.
Yeah, he's not entirely, I don't think he's entirely comfortable up there in front of the cameras. I don't think he likes that. If we were to ask him, I think if there's one thing he doesn't like, I would bet he would say that. I've never asked him that question. Maybe one of us will ask him that question. All right, let's continue this in just a second, because the on-court stuff is still not done with the on-court stuff. We'll talk about that in just a second. No, I feel like one of the signature moments for this was going to be a Jaylen Brown episode, and we were always going to talk about this play because I think it was a signature moment for him against the Indiana Pacers when he had that block shot, comes down, drives, kicks to Derrick White in the corner. Was that game 4, right? And Derrick White hits the 3, and Derrick White had a horrible shooting night that game, and still Jaylen trusted Derrick White in that moment to hit that shot, and the entire Pacers bench was saying something as he was shooting it, and he turned and said something to the Pacers bench, which shows you like the competitiveness and the ego. But I think having a guy that they can trust, we talk about Jayson, and Jayson was on a podcast I haven't listened to yet with, was it Asia Wilson and Sue Bird talking about, like, I've seen some clips where he's talking about like, they talked to me about me being, willing to pass and be a facilitator and all of that stuff. And this was probably Jaylen Brown's best facilitation season as well. I think having a guy like Derrick White that you can trust, it makes it easy to say, I'm going to be a more willing passer. Like, we can give Jaylen and Jayson the credit that they deserve for passing the ball, but part of why they didn't pass the ball, I think, before is they didn't have full trust in who they were passing the ball to. Like, you were passing the ball to Marcus Smart, and, they knew that Marcus probably wasn't going to swing it around and get it back to them as often, because he was going to get left so open that he was going to take that shot. But with Derrick White on the floor, they just know we trust them in that situation. It doesn't matter how he's been shooting. We just know that he is going to take the good shot. We trust him to make the right play. I think that's the most important thing. So because everything is intertwined, I feel like Derrick White being as good as he is what helped make Jaylen and Jayson as good as they were facilitating, and vice versa.
Yeah, definitely. I always felt like whenever a team started to overreact to Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, which was kind of the story of the whole postseason and year, it was when the Celtics were at their best because they just have elite guys around them. And Derrick White and Jrue Holiday we're not really role players. Like, actually, on that podcast episode that you mentioned, Tatum said that. He said, Jrue Holiday and Derrick White are maybe like role players on this team, but on another team, they could be primary options. And so that's who's on the court. That's what you're giving up. Like, a lot of times they have the weakest defenders on them as well. So they obviously benefited from that. But I think it was that trust that they certainly earned, both of those guys, that could change the dynamic of this entire team, because all of a sudden Jaylen Brown's driving to the corner, and it's like, I feel like that instinct of how it's sometimes Derrick White, now even if it's Xavier Tillman, you still are in that instinct of like trusting your teammates and making that pass, because all year long, the guys that have taken those shots have hit them. Like, I feel like every close game that we had this year, Derrick White was the reason that they were able to pull away in some capacity, whether he hit a timely three or he made a timely stop. And so I feel like both him and Holiday kind of created this culture of like trusting the role players because they are elite role players. And from a shooting standpoint, they were also two of the best shooters on the team. So it really did stand out to me as just a thing that almost like changed the way that Tatum and Brown were kind of thinking about their own decision-making as well.
And we got to give some credit to Joe Mazzulla here and Derrick White. I think this is part of why Derrick was so willing to take this extension now. And surprisingly so, because I thought it made sense for him to go into free agency next year and try to get the Jrue Holiday contract. Like, why not try to push for, 150 million, push for more? Like, why not? Because he's probably going to get it. The Celtics are in a spot where they can't let him walk. But he didn't like hold the Celtics' feet to the fire. He said 4 years and $118 million. Like, that's fine with me. But it's definitely, I think, a below market contract for him. Yeah. And that type of decision-making, there's a lot that goes into it. It's, where else am I going to go that's going to have this kind of chance to win a championship? And I think he understands, like, the more championships he wins, the more he has to offer down the road, right? Post-playing career, like, it's just endorsements and stuff like that. He can make up the difference in endorsements just by being a multiple-time champion. But Joe Mazzulla trusting him, he said it when Joe said, you're going to start this year. And, he said that, I forget the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of, that gave me a lot of confidence. I love Joe Mazzulla. I'd do anything for that guy. Being in a situation where you love where you're playing, you kind of love your teammates, you love the situation, and you love the coach. Like, what more does a guy want? And the fact that Derrick can sit there and be like, I'm good. I'm not going to ask for anything more because I could leave and maybe get some more money. But why would I want to leave this? And it's not a typical way of thinking for an NBA player.
And it's actually funny. He was Chris Forsberg interviewed him on his podcast yesterday, I think, about that extension. And he said, it was really easy because I wanted to stay and they wanted to keep me here. And I was thinking it really wasn't that easy because he was potentially leaving millions of dollars on the table. And most players, that would be a really tough decision. But it sounded like that was as simple as it went for him, that he wanted to sign the extension and they wanted to keep him. And so it would happen, they did it and it happened. And I do think, I think you're right. I think that his relationship with Joe is a big part of why he wants to stay here because I feel like of all the players, and they've all spoken really highly of him, so it's hard to know exactly all the individual dynamics. He's probably the one where you can tell there's a really deep emotional connection and this feeling of allegiance, like he helped save his career or give him another chance or boost him to the kind of the place that he is now. He's used language around Joe that feels a little bit stronger than even some of the other guys that everybody's spoken really highly of him, obviously. But I do feel like there's an extra element there almost.
Yeah, it is kind of great to see. And, I'm kind of past, I'm in my 50s. I don't have favorite players or anything like that anymore, but it's hard not to call Derrick White one of my favorites, around because he's just he is such a normal guy. And it's interesting because the relationship between media and players is obviously there's a distance there, but he's never been kind of standoffish or anything like that. I joked, when he came in with the shaved head, I said, I joked with him. I was like, one season around me and you finally come around, and, he's like, yeah, you're my inspiration. He's just busting balls with me. And he's that kind of guy. He's the type of guy that he can walk into a party and I think maybe be a little uncomfortable because, like you said, I think shy is kind of a way to describe him, at least with the media. But he's the type of guy that everyone wants to talk to because he can listen to the conversation. He can drive the conversation. He just is the type of guy that he'll pepper in some jokes and whatever. I think everybody kind of wants Derrick's everybody's friend. He's a nice guy, a hell of a basketball player. What a perfect guy to have on your team. So that's the best way I can say. If we're appreciating Derrick White, the league, if you gave me an entire NBA full of Derrick Whites, I'd be happy.
I think for sure. And I honestly that's again, I know we did this episode on Derrick White because of the Olympic selection, but it's when you have a 12th spot, you don't want to bring someone in that's going to mix up the dynamic, especially he's coming in late. They've already had training camp. I think he's just a really safe personality. You could probably add him to every one of the 30 NBA teams, even a team like the Pistons, and he'd provide a lot of value, whether it's mentorship, whether it's guidance. I think he inspires other people to play better and to play harder because they see how hard he's playing. A lot of times I've asked some of the younger guys, who's your inspiration? And regardless of position, a lot of times they're I want to be like Derrick White. Drew Peterson told me, that's my model player. That's they're completely different builds. They're completely different games. But I think he just brings out the best in people, and they just see the way that he plays and how hard he plays and how all around and kind of what a kind of path, a good teammate he is and everything. And everybody just wants to be better because he's around. He's just one of those people that has that impact. And so, yeah, I think it's now being recognized by everybody. I think it's not just a Celtics thing anymore. Everybody in the league realizes it.
Yeah. Well, D'Angelo Russell said at the beginning of the season, I want to be like a Derrick White, which he most certainly is not like a Derrick White, but it was a nice thing for him to say. But anyway.
And I feel when he said that, it was still kind of a radical thing to say. That got a lot of attention because they were why did you say Derrick White? But now it's a very common thing to feel. So at the time he was one of the early people that said that.
Let's wrap this up by bringing it full circle. ESPN didn't put him in the top 100. Where do you think he will start next season in their top 100? Or do they just do the hilarious thing and leave him out no matter what? Just keep going with it. Keep up the bit.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta think he's in the top 30. Is that a crazy thing to say?
No, I don't think it's a crazy thing to say.
I think he's around there, in the early 30s, maybe late 20s. I'm pretty bad. I feel I'd have to look at the whole ranking and move people around.
Well, that's what I would guess. I mean, it's I'm putting you on the spot, but there's 30 NBA teams, and I would say the top 30 would be every team's best player. So can he be the best player on some of these teams that are out there? Yeah, for sure. Some of these tanking teams, he would definitely be the best player on some of these tanking teams. Maybe those teams have young players that haven't gotten better than Derrick White and they have more promise, but I think Derrick White can be the best player on some of those like lower level teams, at least this upcoming season. So, top 30, top 40, somewhere in the top half of the 100 at the very, very least. I would say somewhere between 30 and 40 might be the spot. But I think it would be hilarious if they just said no Derrick White, just an asterisk, like, nope, we just now forever will refuse to put Derrick White in the top 100. Noah, appreciate you hopping on. Thank you so much, and very happy, very excited to hear all of your new jobs, all 20 jobs that you're having. Leave some for the rest of us.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks to Noah. Thanks to you for listening. Thanks to you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this show and had some fun. Like, we're going to keep doing this. And like I said, today was actually going to be Jaylen Brown because he was the finals MVP. So we're going in no particular order. It was Derrick because of the news, and who knows, we'll just kind of pepper these in. We're going to appreciate the entire team basically throughout this offseason because there's a lot of time to fill. I'm 5 days a week through the rest of July, 3 days a week through August and September. Still talking about Summer League, Team USA and Canada. We're recording this before they play a late game exhibition, a friendly, so to speak. So that'll be in tomorrow's podcast. So subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Watch the show on YouTube. Get into the comment section. I would love it now if you shared the podcast and told everybody that they should be listening to and watching the Locked On Celtics podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.